Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to our conversation. I'm Cullum Line. I'm the Youth Ministry Coordinator here at St. Anne's. And with me, as usual,
I'm Father Matthew. I'm the pastor here at St. Anne's.
nice to see you again, Father. And for the first time in our glorious hot seat, or whatever we call this nice little leather chair where we have our guest, is my coworker, fellow man in the trenches. Introduce yourself, sir.
I'm Clark Jaman. I'm the Coordinator of Evangelization and Adult Faith Formation here at the parish.
Awesome.
What does that mean? That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is a mouthful. It's a hard thing to explain to people, but the easiest way to break it down is that at the parish we have 3 full-time pastoral staff positions: one for children, one for youth, that's Column, and then one for adults. And so I'm the adult guy. Patty and Trina kind of share the children ministry. But yeah, I do. So like RCIA is a big part of what I do. Evangelization primarily through the Discovery program. And then also preparing parents for baptism of their infants. What else do I do? Marriage prep.
Yeah. A lot of it is using those sacramental opportunities as really as evangelizing opportunities, right? Being
That's
aware
the
that
goal.
that's what we want to do in those moments.
That's the goal, yeah.
Safe to say we keep Clark pretty busy.
I don't have a lot of downtime when I'm at work.
We can just call you adult guy from now on. That's
Adult
guy.
Shorter
Title.
Yeah, it's great. I'm
What
used
would
to
that make
youth
you?
guy. Why, it's fair is fair. Adult guy, kids, ladies.
Am I the mask guy?
we-
What's my,
the mask guy?
You're the everything else guy. We're just helping you out.
I feel these abbreviations are maybe not totally fair to all we bring in our giftedness, but awesome. Glad to have you. I'm not sure why it took so long finally to get you in the chair, but we're excited.
When you guys started doing this, or at least kind of we're like in a solid rhythm, I was on parental leave. And so I wanted, Courtney and I were going to come on like during that time and like do it together. And that was kind of the goal. And I really had my heart set on Courtney and I doing this together, my wife, but didn't work out. And now we're just like crazy busy, 2 kids under the age of like 2.5. So I don't know if she's going to be in the hot seat anytime soon, but
we can have Judah running around here and have you
There we
both
go.
on screen.
Yeah, kids are welcome. Yeah, we'll hook
would
up
be
some
nice.
lapel mics, and it would be entertaining.
Actually, speaking of, Judah was at Mass this morning. Courtney and Judah were at
Yeah.
Mass, and I think he was singing along with me on some of the chants. Was that him? I think it was him.
he does that at home all the time. And so I wouldn't be surprised.
It's good practice. There
Not
you go.
supposed to sing in church, but I'll let it go for Judah.
We actually just got him a mass kit. We're
Oh, wow.
giving it to him for Christmas, so he doesn't know about it yet. And
Nice.
I don't think he's going to watch us. So.
Yeah, careful now.
But yeah, it's a really beautiful like wooden mass set that was made with like a wood lathe.
Oh yeah,
It's
awesome.
really, really nice, really
Yeah,
cool. And
it's
so we're
nice
going to give
with
half it to him for Christmas and then half of it to him for his birthday, and then he'll be celebrating mass at home.
Years ago, we found for Christmas a Lego mass set.
Oh, wow.
I think I was more excited than my kids at the time. I was like, let's build it. I was like, look, it's a tabernacle. But all these cool ways we can bring the faith home is lots of fun.
Yeah.
Lots happening in the parish. We're starting to kind of gear up. Clark and I were saying it's getting back to normal in our new normal, but, ministry's starting to start. And I know you guys are getting ready. Discovery, RCA, all that stuff is starting to roll. And how's that going? You're excited, stressed, overwhelmed, all of the above?
All of the above, definitely. It is very exciting. Like we had our first catechumenate meeting last Wednesday, a week ago today from when we're recording this. I'm not sure when it's actually going to hit the waves, but and it's just such a great group. And we're preparing for our second meeting tonight. And the second one is even more exciting because the first one, everyone just meets each other and it's all housekeeping stuff and like, not the most exciting stuff. But tonight I feel like this is the real start. So I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah, again, just an awesome group of people. And then our Discovery faith studies are actually kicking off tonight. Not with the whole shebang, but we're starting Commission, which is the 5th and final study in the series.
Wow.
And so we just have a small group of people that have done the rest of the studies and are going through that. And I'm leading through that. So yeah, really looking forward to that.
That's super exciting. I had a team meeting for our junior youth ministry, which hopefully will kick off next week, every second week again. And it was just really exciting to have all in the same space, social distancing, talking, and like how we're going to do this. Are we going to do it with mass? Are we going to space it out? But just like an excitement to do it, and to say, like we were talking about early in the spring, what does this make possible? Like how are we going to do this? And so we're really trying to lean into small group ministry and kind of these connectors we have high schools to kind of bring that to junior and try to find like an online way, because we know some families maybe aren't going to be comfortable coming in person, but how can we connect them? And it was just I left with a lot of possibilities. It could have been a lot of concern or questions, but it was like no, we're going to do this. We're going to figure it out. But so we're excited to get that rocking and rolling.
And that's my sense is like if we're smart and if we're creative, you can do a lot of ministry safely in this time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And we were saying, I was just talking with our music ministry coordinator, Ken Knights, and he was saying we got more and more musicians talking about, like, can I come back? Can I sing? Can I play? How does this work? So it's great to see. I noticed to our mass numbers, more people booking mass. I think people are more and more starting to come back and worship with us in person again. This is exciting.
Yeah. A funny story of that is a friend of the parish, a friend of mine in the parish messaged me and he's like, wanting to go to mass, and he's like, it's all booked. Is something wrong? Like, what happened? I was like, it just filled up.
Something wrong.
Like, no, because like normally you were saying usually it gets to the weekend and there's still usually a few spots open, and this one random kind of weekend had filled up a bit faster. Might have been baptism or something, but it was just like I was like, no, I think just more people are coming, and getting keener in on it, and I guess that's a good problem. So
absolutely,
that was exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw somebody in the welcome area today, and I told her, it's not a person I see every day or whatever, but I told her, I feel like it's been so long since I've seen you. Am I just imagining? And she said, no, it's my first time being in this building since March.
Wow.
So yeah, it's really nice to see people kind of trickling back and reconnecting with people.
Yeah.
So
awesome. Speaking of trickling back into church, and our experience is you shared to start off for Helmley your experience of online masses and all this craziness of COVID. And you want to jump in and share what we talked about on Sunday?
Back to the homily. Yeah. So the gospel, of course, was this parable of the workers in the vineyard, and some work all day and some work just the last hour, and all get paid the same amount. And the workers who worked all day are upset. And it took this a chance to focus really on this idea of envy. And especially from the last line of the master to these workers, are you envious because I am generous? And I was thinking too, I found that there's a neat connection between the last few weeks. So 2 weeks ago, we had gossip. Last week was unforgiveness. And this week, the gospel brought us to envy. So looking really directly into some of these temptations that we experience and how God heals us from them. And so I shared with my own experience of envy. I thought it would let people know that it happens to priests too. And it was actually looking at live stream mass numbers, mine versus other people's, and how like in the heat of the shutdown, I could not watch another church's live stream. Because if we had more, I'd be proud. And if they had more, I'd be jealous. And it just was not good. So I just looked away. And so I guess going to the homily then, though, is the one example I gave of kind of the opposite of envy is when parents watching their kids succeed. Because I thought that's one of those situations where you see someone else's good, someone else doing well. But most of the time, at least, the response is not envy when your child succeeds, but the response is joy. And I think that's a great image of how God calls us to respond all of the time. So I thought with two parents here, maybe you guys can tell me, am I right? Am I wrong? What is that like?
I think you're bang on.
Hey.
My kids haven't got to my kids are only like, the oldest is 2.5, so he hasn't gotten to the point where he can really do much or
he doesn't do things
well.
Better than you just yet.
Hopefully I've got like at least a year or two more to enjoy that.
Time's ticking.
But I can still relate to that. My mom actually tells this story, how she would play Chinese checkers with me growing up. And, when your kid is really young, you don't even try. You're just kind of moving marbles around, and then gradually it gets more and more like the
With
game.
my nephews, I play to win. I don't just mess around. But your mom's nicer than me. We play Mario Kart, and I smoke them. That's the only way they'll learn.
You heard it here. Father Matt is ruthless. I play games with this guy. It's true. He plays to win.
Sorry. Keep going.
No problem.
Your mom was nicer than me, is what we're saying.
She was very nice. And she remembers the first time I beat her, and she was kind of like, wait, what happened? Like, how did that happen? And then she said the next time she kind of made sure she was trying, and she won. But then eventually I started winning like more regularly, and eventually I would just started winning every game. And I don't know exactly how old I was, maybe like, I don't know, 10 or something. But it's interesting to me because she tells that story regularly with such love and affection and like pride for me, like a healthy pride. And so like that's kind of the delight that you were talking about, Father Matt, where she delights in my own success and my own like new endeavor to play this game. And I find that really healing to think of examples like that. And I can't wait until I can have those kind of experiences with my son too.
Yeah, I think you're pretty on point there. I think you were talking about the Beethoven Sonata or whatever. And as I start taking Ezra back into piano lessons and going and quickly realizing he's going to surpass me very quickly.
Oh yeah.
And there's just a natural joy of like, it's just ingrained, it's part of the parenting kind of DNA of like, you want to see the next generation surpass you. There's a lot of connected probably biology stuff in that too. But I think the trick that for me that I was struck by when you were bringing that up was just to say, it's so easy to experience that in a family unit.
Yeah.
It's so hard to extrapolate that when you don't have that built-in excuse, like not that it's excuse, but let's say like, is that my natural disposition to even an extended family, even to just a young person that I see? And
like, is your natural response to rejoice that someone else is good?
Yeah.
Rather than to sort of be envious.
And I think sometimes for me is that I don't, and I think that's just natural. Like there's just a natural situation to some of it. But I think sometimes where that's a harder struggle for me is I'm not attentive enough to it happening in my own house. Okay. Like I think I need to rejoice in those moments of where, like, realize why I'm truly delighting. Like, why am I so happy?
Yeah.
I find recently I've been trying to focus on, I was like, why am I so happy? I'm joyful because, I'm delighting in the success of my child, right? I see, even seeing, we took some family fall photos because that's what you do apparently. And shout out to Hannah Barry who took pictures. I know you guys did some too as well. And but just seeing my daughter, I was like, wow, like you were 10, like you were becoming a young woman. And then she reminded me she'd come to youth group next year, and I had like a mental heart attack. And but also like this bursting of pride of like you're ready to do this. When I have a conversation and she can tell me sometimes more about a Bible story than I can out of memory. And and I was like, wow, I was like, God is working in her life. And so when I'm attentive to that, it's easier for me to practice it when I leave the house.
Right. It's almost like that's interesting. And maybe that's an easy place to build that virtue of rejoicing in other people's success.
Yeah, it kind of comes more naturally, doesn't it? One of my favorite lines lately is to say to my kids, like, I love watching you do that. Like, I love watching you climb into your own high chair, and I love watching you throw that garbage in the garbage can or whatever it is. Like, because Judah is starting to get to the age where he really appreciates my attention, and for me to kind of revel in it like that, I think is really a good habit that I'm trying to build. And it's kind of, like you were saying, Father Matt, a really easy place to start building that muscle or that virtue of delighting in other people.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what about then? That's the positive, and thanks be to God, you guys have those beautiful relationships with your kids. But we also know the experience of envy, and we probably can imagine the possibility that sometimes even in a family, if things are really dysfunctional or if the parents have been really hurt, that might not always be the response even there. Yeah. Right? And so either there or in other places, like, I guess, how do we see envy as the flip side of what you were just describing, I guess?
Yeah, I think there's lots of reasons. You kind of highlight those three, right? The lack of love, confidence, and truth. And which really struck me. For me, it was the confidence one. And I'm not sure why you highlighted that one or what kind of led you to that one. But I could relate to that in my own life, and also just experiences I've seen and some family members, and just in my extended kind of circle of some situations. And I was always like, why is this should be a place of delight. Like, why is envy so obvious in this moment? And I can think in my own life a few times it often was a lack of confidence was kind of the one for me. And then I started to peel that onion back, and I was like, but where does the reason from the reason come from? I'm always like peeling it back. And for me, I noticed in a couple of situations that it was a lack of affirmation of my goodness or the goodness of someone I cared for. That I don't think it was in spite of delighting in the goodness of their, a child or a loved one or somebody else or a coworker. But I think it was sometimes someone's success or someone thriving can, by circumstance, sometimes bring a past wound to the forefront.
Oh yeah,
unintentionally. And I know in the past kind of couple of years for me, that's been a case of things, right? That it's been circumstances has brought wounds forward that I thought I had kind of patched and laid to rest, and maybe connecting to some of our past weeks of this idea of forgiveness and the 77 times and the same wound or the same pain and having to go there.
Yeah.
Maybe that was the case. And sometimes instead of forgiving or processing, maybe the default is just easier to just be envious in that moment.
Yeah, totally. For me, maybe it's because my first time being on the podcast, but maybe I prepared. Maybe I over prepared.
No, that's great.
I was doing adoration before this, and I cracked open the church fathers to see what they had to say about envy. And kind of the church father who seems to have really kind of nailed this, and then all the other ones just kind of, went off him or copied him and built on that, was St. John Damascene, who he said that envy is a form of sorrow. And we don't often think of it as like a sorrow, like a sadness, but he said that it's a form of sorrow, not in our own evil, but in someone else's good that we perceive to be our evil. And so this is kind of what Aquinas and all the rest of our tradition kind of builds off. So what do you guys think about that definition of envy as a sorrow, a type of sorrow?
It's similar to like the second point I had made is the opposite of envy is delight. Mm-hmm. So I think that's like me and Damascene on the same wave, like maybe
totally.
A little bit.
Without realizing it. And I think it's...
But there's something to that for sure.
Might not have perfect language, but sometimes when you see someone or in yourself being envious, and it almost seems like irrational. It's like, this is such an obvious moment to delight. Why are you stuck in envy? Sometimes I catch upon myself or a loved one almost the experience of like pity or wanting to have compassion, to be like I'm sad that you're in this state, and
like you have sort of having compassion for someone who's envious.
Yeah, but also like in my sense of wanting, and maybe that's, as I'm processing that, it was like, well, maybe that's that little semblance of the sorrow, and even a sorrow in your own life. But I find that interesting. I don't think I often maybe interpret it that way, but maybe that's just lack of self-awareness and really understanding what's
I find it pretty insightful. And that's all, like the question I was wrestling with as I tried to prepare this, and I didn't go as deep as I could have, I think, is like why is it that someone else's good is a cause of sorrow for me? I think that is I think what it is. I think that's a good description of envy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then the deeper question of like, why is that the response? And we've seen the opposite, right? That when we love someone, and if we're confident and we're seeing with truth, then we can rejoice in someone else's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it comes down to the interpretation. Like, what is it about that other person's good that I'm interpreting as my evil?
Mm-hmm.
What is it about their, happiness or success that I'm interpreting as my evil? And I think there's times where it can be my evil. Like if somebody steals something from me, it can be evil towards me. But that's not really what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And I think that's possible. But I think the more likely thing, to go back to my own experience of envy and thinking of that now, interpreting of sorrow is, for me, comparison is the thief of joy, and it can lead to envy, and youth ministry can be notorious for that, right? There's so many different parishes and you want ideas and you go on to blogs, or I'm in, these different kind of cohorts or groups, that share ideas, and it can be very helpful. But sometimes I find I was like, all I'm doing is scrolling other people's Instagram feed to realize how good they are at it and how bad I am at it, And even at a team meeting yesterday, one of the leaders was like, "You need to be better at Instagram," and I was like, "I know." But
ouch, man, ouch.
But we grow at it and going in there. But it's to say, okay, am I looking to grow in myself, or am I looking to escape? And I think sometimes I fall into that trap. Is in that sense of like where their good isn't evil. Well, it isn't, but I think I receive it in some ways because for myself, anyways, when I go to this from confidence to peel back, is I think it's belovedness. I really struggle with my understanding of being beloved, and from that is also of God's goodness and His ability to bless us and be generous. I think sometimes where maybe I'm envious is because only so many good ideas exist for youth ministry, and that parish in Atlanta got all the good ideas and all the good leaders, and there's no other original ideas left for poor Cullum in Saskatoon. I don't think I would consciously say, oh, that's true. But I think
we can fall
live
into
under
that though. It's like a scarcity mentality where if others are succeeding, then that like is somehow detracting from my own success.
Yeah, and that's I like that you use the example of when someone steals something from you, because sometimes I think envy does come from feeling as though someone is taking from us what should be ours.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's the ideas, or even like with my issue with the live streams, like if those priests were like taking eyeballs of a shot should be on me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or someone is taking, imagine like within a family, if one sibling is doing really well at something, the other sibling is not, maybe feeling like the successful sibling is like sort of stealing the love and attention of the parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's part of where it comes from, I think.
Yeah. And some of it is like there's real life occasions of this that I think you had said the idea of interpretation. If we choose to interpret something, it can be factually kind of true, and even a situation sometimes in the ministry and the parishes, people change ministries where they volunteer, where they go, and they, graduate and said, I'm moving from youth ministry to this or going in that. I mean, that's happened over the years. Yeah. I've been in this in, a couple decades, but even in the parish here. And, I can catch myself to be like, oh, I'm losing a great volunteer, shout out Philip George going to be a missionary, right?
Yeah.
Like, super
CCO
excited.
Steals so many of our volunteers.
They steal so many.
Both of us miss you, Phil.
Yeah. Both of us. We love you.
We
miss
you. We were leaning on you.
And Caitlin, Mary McLean, like we've had a history of, they've also given us many great leaders too, to be fair.
That's true.
But it is almost this experience that it's like, I am super happy, for Phil and going forward and seeing God work in his life and, and so many countless others, but as a, an example. But I had to like confront in me that part of me was like kind of angry, you know, like not at Phil, but I was like, this is so ridiculous. I had to like call it out in prayer. I was like, Lord, like, this is stupid. Like, I know it's stupid, but why am I still feeling this? Mm-hmm. And it was almost like, and I was like, because I don't trust you, God, right? I don't trust in your goodness, right? And supply that you're going to raise another generation of great leaders, right? But we've had a history in this parish of fostering great disciples and commissioning them. And why suddenly in this frail moment, of lack of faith, do I think, God's going to stop showing up? God's going to stop calling. But yet I fall into that.
Yeah,
so
and that kind of goes back to what we saw as one of the causes for envy is, lack of confidence and also lack of seeing truth. They kind of identified both of them there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another line that's coming to mind for me is Gerard Manley Hopkins, one of my favorite poets, and he has a line that's "Despair, I will not feast on thee." I can't remember. Do you remember where that's from? Yeah, I know you're a Hopkins fan too.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. No, I can't. It's a good line though. Yeah. He's got a few of those. Well, he got a few beautiful poems where he really does wrestle with like despair, almost depression, dark night of the soul. Like he's really raw in some of those. So,
totally. Yeah, really raw and really beautiful.
So what does it mean to feast on despair?
Well, yeah, like to me, despair and sorrow are very similar, right? And so to say like sorrow or despair, I will not feast on thee, that would be like, just for you just watching that live stream of the other mass and being like, oh man, I can't believe
that priest. He's giving a bad homily anyway.
That
like, there are things
like,
I could do to feast on the despair.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Feast on the envy, right? And then the next best thing, or the least worst thing, is to just turn away and not look at them, like you were saying. And sometimes that's the best we can do. But then ultimately, we want to feast on something, right? Because God lays out a feast for us. And so, what are we called to feast on? Well, we're called to delight, like the whole point of your homily, right? To choose to delight in that person, anyways, and really feast on that.
Yeah, and I think that's
the joy,
the progression, right? I think towards the end there, you gave kind of the three options, right? The give in, it's the feasting on the envy, or the sorrow, the despair, right? The idea of looking away, and then you kind of had the look with love or delight, and you're kind of connecting that to the idea of the spectrum of virtue. And vice.
So I was telling these guys in my another thing I learned in my cracking open the church fathers, preparing for this homily, over preparing, was that how every vice, especially the capital vices like envy and lust and sloth, those capital sins as we call them, there's always an opposite vice, and then the virtue is the mean, or the virtue's in the middle. Like, so just for a simple example that we're all familiar with, there's lust and prudishness, and then chastity is in the middle, right? Mm-hmm. So when it comes to envy, the opposite vice is like cowardice. There's like a really other hard word that they actually use to talk about it, but I can't pronounce it. It starts with a P, pusillanimity or something like that. Okay. But it basically means like cowardice,
like thinking
right?
small, basically.
Yeah, basically thinking small and cowardice. we've got envy on one hand. So that would be to just be like, stare at the live stream and be like, oh man, I can't believe this. Like mine's so much better. Why aren't people watching mine? On the other side, cowardice would be like the most extreme example would just be like, well, I'm not even going to do a live stream. Like I just give up. I quit. Like God's not calling me to this.
Yeah.
And then in the middle, is what they call like kindness, or that would be the virtue, like kindness, or even better, I like the translation familial love. So like that kind of love that's best exhibited in a family setting, and that just connecting that to earlier. That's why I love the example of like delighting in your own children, because it's really easy to let the delight in your own children just kind of feast. Like it's just so natural. And so I like how we kind of were saying earlier, that's a good place to kind of grow that virtue and grow that muscle.
Yeah.
So, and I like that point too of, not just cowardice, but kind of like small-mindedness or small thinking. Because that's the thing I hadn't thought of, but I think there's truth there too, that often like part of the source of envy too, or where it comes from, is wanting to do things well. I want to do big things. So if we didn't care about playing a Beethoven sonata or shooting a basketball well or any of those things, like then there'd be no room for envy. Because we have these desires to do a good youth ministry program. Yeah. Then there's a possibility for envy in that.
Yeah. So the way of love is somehow walking in between those two vices and always staying to the mean, staying to the middle, which is not an easy thing to do. And that's why we're talking about it.
Yeah. To make it super practical and down to earth, because this is what I do.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about yard work. And envy is, did I ever share the famous story of, I'm a homeowner for a couple of years now, and really kind of leaning into that. And I got into lawn care for some reason. That's like a thing that I got into, although my lawn's not been great this year, but that's a whole other side.
The snow comes
But it was my brother-in-law. They live just near Cicero in that neck of the woods. And we were driving back from some family gathering or something. And there's a house on the corner of their street that just legitimately has the greatest lawn I've ever seen. It's just like meticulous. They're probably cutting it with like scissors. It's got the edging. It's got the mulch. It's just gorgeous. Yeah. And I lead to envy. And sometimes I find the Lord uses silly and frankly stupid moments to point out my foolishness and say, like, Cullum, snap out of it, and look with familial love, and not with lust. And so I was joking, because my wife points out, she's like, just mow your own grass and get on with life, And we were driving, and so I was trying to make fun of her, making fun of me about it. And as we're turning, I look over to the lawn to point out that, yes, I'm being ridiculous. And so I reached out, and if you're on camera, you could see, and I kind of like did like a, and like raised it, clawed my hand like at the lawn. One of those
I thought we were risky, but not risque here.
No, I know. It's just, I was just being goofy. And as I was doing it, I got a good laugh. But then I noticed that there was a pedestrian walking right past the van I did that, and looked at me really funny. And I instantly turned like a tomato and felt really guilty and turned around. And but it's the simple thing of like, I notice it every day, and there's like my fence is falling down, and I have to fix my fence and go. And I keep looking of like, what's the best fence? How can I build the cheapest, most practical, most enduring one? I look at this idea, I look at that idea. My wife says, so often, we're both guilty of it, but me probably the most, of over researching.
Oh yeah,
right. Which sometimes leads to envy. It means a good. At first, I was like, I want to do the best. I want to figure it out. But then I just keep thinking, just keep comparing, just keep whatever. And in the meantime, Sharon is like, in the meantime, our fence is falling down.
We just need a fence.
That's the problem.
Like, just buy some boards and put them up. Right. Just do the virtuous act is just to care for what is right in front of you, which is what I'm going to do this weekend. And there's so many just practical moments of that where I have to like, I don't know if it makes sense, of like, I have to kind of edit my inputs of like, if I'm going into this group or I'm having this conversation, like what is my intention? If I'm watching that live stream, is it to get an idea, or is it to escape and feel better about how great we are, how bad we are? You know, like, so I have to edit even like the news feed with the current news of like, why am I listening? Why am I reading this? And I find that helps me, like, before I go down the path, realize like what path am I wanting to walk right now?
Yeah, just be careful. I think you're saying, like, to not fall into the over comparison. Yeah, because that's when you're constantly looking at other people's things and ideas. Like, that's the comparison can come in easily, and that can be a dangerous thing.
Yeah, that's very similar to your example that you shared on Sunday about social media, how it's such an easy place to compare things to. It's no different on, like, I know it's not really social media, but like whatever websites you research fences on, it's like so easy to compare, The internet is just like, you got to be really careful with it. It's obviously a good tool, but it can really enable that comparison.
And you just have to know what you're going into, right? To know that what you're seeing is not real.
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't tell the story in the homily, but when I was in Barcelona last summer when life was very different. I spent a week or so in Barcelona, and I actually saw an Instagram influencer at work.
Ooh.
And it was in this beautiful park designed by a famous architect overlooking Barcelona and then the Mediterranean down below. I was walking around in there, and I saw this group of people, and there was this woman perfectly made up, clothes perfect, hair all perfect, and she had her hand like this with a blue dove on her hand. And there's all these people like taking pictures of her. And I was watching it thinking, like, what the heck am I seeing? What is this? And then one of her people came over to me and said, oh, this is blah, 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 whatever her name is. You should follow her on Instagram. And I didn't want to admit I don't know what Instagram or how it works. I just walked away. But it struck me like there's nothing real about this, right? What the followers are seeing is not at all what's really happening.
Yeah, you saw the artificiality of it just in plain view.
And there is a fine line to all this stuff too, and especially social media and the internet of all these occasions of, like, you see parents and people sharing about their kids and going, and there is sometimes I've been in situations, even myself, I was like, I'm sharing to show off.
Yeah.
Like that can be there too. To say, it's easier to do that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sick of looking at your perfect life, so look at my perfect life. You can kind of lean back. But there are honestly sometimes, like, we share, and different families have the different takes where they don't post pictures of kids. We do. And I'm not telling people to, just the reason that we do. But for me, my intention is sometimes when we share pictures is because, like, it's me delighting in my children and the goodness that God has give. And how can I not share that, in a safe way, in a practical way?
And that's the best reason to do it.
And that came back from the story that always had me focus on delight and also not underestimating the power of delight, especially in children, as we don't know what God's going to do with it. We did these little videos back in the day called Deep Thoughts, Big Rich Air with my daughter when she was younger, and they're silly and goofy. And we shared them online, but it was like kids say the darndest things. But we kind of post them on YouTube or Facebook, and it was mostly just for our extended family to, like, keep tabs and see what's going on with the kids. And then it was like a former coworker who was struggling through cancer at the time had sent out a message and said, like, I'm so thankful that you post these videos or whatever. She's like, that got me through treatment. I'm sure many had prayer and a lot of good work and healthcare work, but she said one of the things was that she watched some of these videos during her treatments, and that kind of helped, right? And that gave her strength. And I was like, wow, me delighting in my child somehow gave strength. Like, we had no idea that could be helpful, and that always kind of struck with me, right? To say, don't hold back compliments. They're authentic, right? If you have true joy, share it.
That's good. Yeah, and sharing what we have with true joy.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the remedy for envy. Just to get practical once again, like we were saying, I think the remedy for envy is to do acts of familial love or kindness, like we were saying. And like the social media examples that you were sharing just made me think of, like, I don't know, some of you out there are friends with me on Facebook and some of you aren't. You're welcome to send me a friend request and we can be friends. But you can look, like, we recently did the fall photo shoot.
Sure.
Like we were saying, and it's a very manicured, perfect photo. But when I uploaded that just yesterday, it made me laugh because the one before that was a picture of, like, when our youngest daughter was first born, and, like, we had not slept in like 3 days, and we were in our living room, and I had long hair at the time, and I had, like, my wife's headband on to keep the hair out of my eyes. It just was like, but we were all smiling and happy, and I love that photo. And so I almost, like, made a point. I post something on Facebook like every 6 months, whether I need to or not. But I made a point of posting that photo as my cover photo because it shows, like, the real reality, and, like, to me it's like an act of what's the word, like asceticism, like overreaching to, like, go out in an act of kindness or charity. Maybe that's kind of a silly example, but this world of social media is a silly world. But, like, another better one is probably, like, so I'll admit, confession time, that when the live streaming thing was happening, and that was kind of the focus of everything we were doing. It was a temptation for me, and it wasn't about the numbers that I was tempted to be envious. It was more about like the audio visual quality of like all the different parishes, comparing them. Yeah. And sometimes I fell into like envy or like pride, unhealthy pride about like the way that we were doing our live streams compared to other parishes. And so for me, the act of charity to kind of overcome that was to like help out the other parishes when they asked me for help, like, well, how do you do this audio video stuff or whatever? What software or hardware do you use? And kind of just like helping them out, going out of my way to make sure I return every one of those calls and messages. Because it's kind of like when you have a tree that's slightly bent over, and if you want to straighten it out, to go with the gardening analogy, you don't just, or the yard work analogy, you don't just straighten it, like tie it to a stake straight. You straighten it out the other way, right? Yeah. So then when you release the stakes and the ropes, it goes back into the middle. So I think like doing acts of like the opposite of envy, like kindness, love, a kind of that specifically relate to the sin of envy. That's how you like kind of overcome that vice.
Yeah, that's a great point. And there, especially because like you could have very well like ignored those calls and then like you could have kept on having a nicer or whatever. We had whatever it was they were wanting to learn.
Yeah, because that happens. Like I don't return calls all the time. Sorry to everyone out there that it's just, sometimes they just get by me, but I made a point of answering those ones.
It's an act of charity. And I know that sometimes, you get messages for youth ministry stuff, or I know we homeschool, and a lot of families are deciding to do cyber school or online school or whatever with this fall. Yeah. And so the homeschool Facebook groups and different stuff, and some people were just direct messaging myself, but I know my wife got a bunch of them. Right? And she's really taking her time to like say like, this is what we're doing and this and like sometimes like it's a stock kind of response, but she would always tweak and like spend time. And one was like a friend of my cousin and like a whole like another province or this, and I was like, you have like no like obligation to like do this,
except like Christian charity.
No, I know, but I mean, like it's not like you don't have to field that message. It's just a random Facebook message that's unprompted or whatever. But yet she takes the time to do that, because she's like, I know the anxiety or the stress they're under, and then there's a lot of questions. We still go through a lot of that and think about that. I remember when we were starting and thinking about it, and I was like, okay, this is practical charity, right? And sharing the joy of why we homeschool or go in that.
Totally.
And it's the same thing of like, it could be easy. I had another youth worker, who had messaged and kind of in the middle of the day and came chat, and I was like, I got a lot of stuff I got to do. Yeah. But I was like, you know what? Like they need that phone call, and I need that phone call sometimes too, and to go and to say, and it was interesting. It was like a small little mentoring thing, and there's so much I still need to learn too. But I actually left that phone call that was really giving pretty basic stuff to somebody else, kind of affirmed in like, oh, I need to get better at that. I'm not doing this right. Like it really grounded me in the moment of where I was. And I think it was your term of familial love, right? Yeah. Is as we were thinking of delight, is also to say, we need to also like delight in our circumstances. As much as I love the Raptors, even though they're out of the playoffs or whatever, like you delight in something that's far away of this, like where is it most realistic and most, you experience it to the deepest level is like in your surroundings, right? Starting at home, starting in, the successes of the workplace and, of your coworkers and being excited for that. And
so that's maybe a good way to kind of wrap this up. I think is that call to delight in love, delight in the people around us.
Yeah. So that, I guess that's be a question or a challenge for the community is, what do you delight in? Where are you delighting right now? Or maybe where are you called to delight that maybe is a place of envy or a temptation to envy? Feel free, if you dare, to share that and to let us know, and just to hold all of us in prayer as we try to live deeply in delight and this experience of a joy-filled life that I think the Lord's calling us to. And hopefully you enjoyed the three amigos here. We finally made it happen.
Thanks, Clark, for joining us. Thanks for the research.
For having me.
I do appreciate that.
Yeah, there you go. He makes us look smart, so it's great.
I just read it in a book like 10 minutes before we started.
Well done.
It still counts, man.
Okay, I'll take it.
Well,
thank you.
God bless you guys, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.